Live from the campus of Washington and Lee University with news for Rockbridge County, this is the Rockbridge Report.
Welcome to the Rockbridge Report final election broadcast of the night. I'm Faith Isbell.
And I'm Crawford Humphreys. Let's take a look at the election results across the state and the region.
All right, let's take a look at the top of the ticket here in Virginia. Tim Kaine was declared the winner of his seat in the Senate, defeating Republican Corey Stewart. We have about 95% of the precincts reporting nationwide. We have Democratic incumbent Tim Kaine at about 56% of the vote, followed by Republican Corey Stewart at about 42% of the vote. And here in Lexington, Tim Kaine pulled out a victory. With 100% of the precincts reporting, we have incumbent Tim Kaine at about 71% of the vote, followed by Republican Corey Stewart at about 27% of the vote. And in Buena Vista, Corey Stewart took home the victory with 60% of the vote, followed by Tim Kaine at about 38% of the vote. Corey Stewart also found similar success in Rockbridge County with 60% of the vote, followed by Tim Kaine at 38% of the vote.
In the 6th District, Republican Ben Cline took home the victory, defeating Democrat Jennifer Lewis. You can see there Cline with 60% of the vote, Jennifer Lewis with 40%, with 90% of precincts reporting. Here in Lexington, Jennifer Lewis took a decisive victory for the House of Representatives seat. Lewis with 67% of the vote, Ben Cline with 33%. In Buena Vista, on the other hand, Ben Cline took the win, 100% of precincts reporting Cline with 68% of the vote, Jennifer Lewis with just 32%. Ben Cline also took the win in Rockbridge County, 100% of precincts reporting there, 65% in favor of Ben Cline and 36% in favor of Jennifer Lewis. We started the night with 7 Republican representatives in Virginia and 4 Democrats. Democrats have already taken over 1 seat previously held by a Republican.
And for Lexington City Council, both incumbents will return on the council with 100% of the precincts reporting. We have incumbent David Seigler at 27% of the vote, with Chuck Smith, incumbent, at 25% of the vote. Also with Dennis Ayers coming in at 26% of the vote. The Commonwealth also had 2 constitutional amendments on the ballot. The first is asking if localities should give tax exemptions to flood-prone properties if improvements have been made to the property. That amendment passed with flying colors. The second constitutional amendment on the ballot would allow a property tax exemption for surviving spouses of veterans and would allow the spouse to move residences and still receive the exemption. That amendment also passed by a large margin.
The Rockbridge Report's Gus Cross joins us live from Salerno's restaurant in Lexington, where the Republicans are finishing up their election night festivities. Gus, what is the mood like there?
Local Republicans have been filing out of Salerno's for the past hour, feeling good about the local election, with Ben Cline winning over Jennifer Lewis for the U.S. House of Representatives seat. With Ben Cline winning that election, his seat will now be open, and 4 local Republicans have already intended to run for his seat, one of which who is here tonight. That is all for tonight. I'm Gus Cross.
8, 7.
Thanks, Gus. Tonight in the studio, we welcome Washington and Lee University Professor of Politics, Brian Alexander. So what are your thoughts on the night so far?
Well, I think the thoughts we're in for potentially a long night in terms of seeing what becomes of the fate of the expected blue wave. All in all, this election is in no small part a referendum, I think, about the Trump presidency. You saw tremendous enthusiasm among Democrats in terms of record numbers of Democrats running in the midterms. You saw a record fundraising levels from Democrats, and you see a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. However, at the same time, we see a lot of enthusiasm on the Republican side, and I think under President Trump, we've seen incredible amount of turnout and incredible amount of an uncanny ability, really, for this president to turn people out and to get them to vote. So the question really is, if this is a referendum on the Trump presidency, it's going to come to turnout, and the question remains, who turns out?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the lack of the blue wave so far?
It is a lack of a blue wave indeed. Now, I think in the Senate, so the expectation on the Senate was that the Republicans would maintain the Senate. The Democrats were probably long out of striking distance of the Senate for much of this year. But we're looking at a potential 54 to possibly as many as 56 Republican seats in the Senate. So you're going to see a solidly Republican Senate. barring some very, very late turns. In the House, however, it comes down to turnout, and we don't know in some of the western states where it is. I think on the East Coast and some of the eastern districts, there's not a lot of evidence of a tremendous blue wave, but Democrats have picked up a couple of seats. So I think it's early to tell, but is there a wave? I'm not getting out my surfboard.
And so in terms of voter turnout, are we seeing a different demographic? Are we seeing a different audience here?
Well, this election has posted record early voting with upwards of 40 million votes cast in 2018. That compares to 47 million early voters in the 2016 presidential election. So we're nearing presidential election turnout in terms of early voting. Mm-hmm. Only 23 million early voters participated in the 2014 election. So in terms of early voting, we're approaching record numbers, maybe more participants overall in this election than we've seen in 50 years. The question that we're going to have to look at, and tonight we have this exciting opportunity for all of us to be social scientists and see who it is that actually participates in this election. Is it the people, do we continue to see high numbers of young people, African Americans, Latinos, the types of folks who participate in early voting, or do we see in this election day voting, is it the standard voter, which is largely older, largely white, and largely Republican?
Mm-hmm.
So after tonight's election, all eyes turn to 2020. What would you say is at stake tonight?
Well, I think what's at stake tonight is, in the simplest terms, control of the Senate and the House, but that's also going to determine who controls the Trump agenda. If the Democrats do not have a check on the Trump agenda through victory, let's say, in the House, we're going to be back to where we were yesterday, which is a Republican-controlled Congress and a president who remains potentially unchecked by the other branch, at least in terms of partisan politics. And yes, tomorrow morning, election for 2020 starts. We should look for Democrats to do a lot of soul searching, depending on how strong or how weak their victory is tonight. And that's going to determine what kind of candidate the Democrats think they could front in 2020.
Thank you, Professor Alexander. Coming up on the Rockbridge Report, a look into how other parts of the region voted on this election.
And a look at both the Republican Celebration Party and the Democratic headquarters here in Lexington. All that and more coming up on the Rockbridge Report. Welcome back to the Rockbridge Report. Let's take a look at some more local races across Rockbridge County. First, let's take a look at the final results of Glasgow Town Council race, the only competitive race in Rockbridge County where 4 people ran for 3 seats. So with 100% of the precincts reporting, we have incumbent James Sonny Williams coming in at 33% of the vote, followed by Barrett McFadden at about 24% of the vote and Aaron Britton at 22% of the vote. In the uncontested Buena Vista City Council race, we have 100% of the precincts reporting, with Staniel Coffey coming in at 96% of the vote. In the uncontested race for Goshen Mayor, we have 100% of the precincts reporting, with Thomas McCraw coming in at 100% of the vote.
For Goshen Town Council, just 1 person ran for 3 open seats. The other 2 seats will be chosen by write-in vote. Shirley Rohr leads the way at 100% of the vote right now, with 100% of precincts reporting. In the Walkers Creek School Board race, Neil Whitmore takes the lead at 99% of the vote, with 40% of precincts reporting so far.
Here in Lexington, the Rockbridge Report's Donald LeCompte visits the Democratic headquarters.
We're back here at the Democratic headquarters in Lexington, and within the past hour or so, there's been a bit of a mood shift. We did hear that there was a concession in the race for the 6th district. Michelle, would you like to talk to us a little bit about that race this evening?
Well, you can't say that Jennifer didn't put up a good fight, and even though she may not have prevailed in this particular election, she will continue fighting. She will run for the seat again, and we'll be behind her all the way.
Great. So lots of optimism here, looking towards the future, not just here in the 6th district, but also around the country. Back to you.
Thanks, Donald. Coming up on the Rockbridge Report, we'll give you a look at how things are going in close races across the state.
We'll also show you how things are going nationally. All that and more next.
Here in Virginia, we have tight races in multiple races in the House of Representatives, including the Virginia 2nd and the Virginia 7th District. Both races are considered a toss-up. 1 seat held by a Republican has already gone to a Democrat in the Virginia 10th District.
In Florida, it is a toss-up between Democrat Andrew Gillum and Republican Ron DeSantis. In Georgia, Republican Brian Kemp has a significant lead over Stacey Abrams. This race garnered national attention after former President Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey campaigned for Abrams. Abrams is the first African in Tennessee, with 31% of the precincts reporting the Republican Bill Lee has a significant lead over Democrat Carl Dean. In Texas, there is a toss-up race
between Democrat Beto O'Rourke and incumbent Ted Cruz. In Indiana, Republican Mike Braun defeated incumbent Democrat Joe Donnelly. In Tennessee, with 50% of precincts reporting, Republican Marsha Blackburn is winning over Democrat Phil Bredesen. Taylor Swift endorsed Bredesen as her favorite candidate for Senate.
That's all for tonight's Rockbridge Report complete election coverage.
You can keep up to date with our local election coverage on our website, rockbridgereport.wlu.edu. Thank you for watching.